2020, resumption of debate on the second reading and on the amendment moved by the member for Kingston.
I thank the clerk and I now call the member for Lilley.
Thank you, Speaker. This is actually the resumption of debate from discussion we were having in June, and it boggles the mind really that I come back to the House in those months since to report that things have actually gotten worse for the childcare sector rather than better in the months that this government has had to repair the damage that they have done with the response, the COVID response to an already crisis-ridden sector. And we know that things have gotten worse because we have uncovered more information about the status of the childcare sector since June. Information from, for example, the Department of Education that shows that 25% of families are still waiting for the reconciliation of their 2018-19 childcare subsidy. Now, just to be clear, we are in the 2020-2021 financial year. This means that the government has withheld money from some families for over a year, not a standard that I think that they would accept in reverse. And in the same period, the government has collected $130 million from families in childcare debts, despite ongoing concern about the accuracy of their debt collection system. The hypocrisy of this is absolutely staggering. The government is gung-ho when it is accusing families of owing them money, but moving at an absolute snail's pace to hand money back when it is rightfully owed to Australian families. Now, the second failure that we have from new information that's been released from the department shows just how high childcare fees have gotten, or had already gotten, pre-pandemic. Fees had jumped by 4.6% in a year until December 2019, with CPI only rising by 1.8% in that same period. Now, this was supposed to be reforms brought in by Prime Minister Morrison when he was responsible minister, that was going to fix childcare affordability. This is supposed to be the better scheme. This is supposed to be the fix, and yet fees have jumped 4.6% in that year. And with the childcare subsidy pinned to CPI, this data shows that the financial burden being carried by families has been snowballing. Around the country, the hit has been even worse, and Brisbane families, where I'm from, where I represent, were slogged with up to a 14% fee increase in childcare. Snapping back to these high fees in the middle of a recession will simply make childcare out of reach for many, and that is to the detriment of us all. Families who have taken a pay cut over the past few months will now be forced to give up childcare, and in turn, parents will be forced to give up work. We've also had reports emerge since we last debated this in June, showing the deep flaws of the additional childcare subsidy, which the minister claims is the panacea for supporting struggling families to access early education. This subsidy was shown to be wrapped up in red tape and completely insufficient to cover the tens of thousands of families now facing hardship. All of this new information is evidence of a government that is letting families down when they are doing it tougher than ever. And their decision to snap back to their old pre-pandemic childcare system has left many Australian families wondering how they will get by. They were already being crippled by high childcare fees before the pandemic, with out-of-pocket costs soaring by 7.2% in 1 year alone. Now, in the middle of a recession, when parents are relying on mortgage and rent moratoriums, JobKeeper and JobSeeker to survive, childcare fees will just simply be out of reach. And if these families can't afford early child education and care, it will hurt the parents, because without access to affordable care, many parents will simply be forced to give up or turn down work, which is a sacrifice that is most often taken by women. And in the midst of a recession, the last thing that our economy needs is working parents being unable to take up work because they cannot find childcare. One of the key levers to drive economic growth out of a recession is workforce participation. And yet here we are with these policies and decisions being taken by the government that makes workforce participation day by day more and more difficult for Australian mothers to do. It will also make the children suffer because unaffordable childcare means that some kids miss out, and they miss out on receiving an early education, which is of particular concern for our 4-year-olds who are at risk of starting primary school in 2021 already behind. We know that vulnerable and at-risk children who stand to benefit the most from an early education are the first to miss out in these circumstances. And we know that this new information and these decisions hurt providers, because if families begin unenrolling their children from early education, the resulting drop in demand creates significant viability issues for providers. And we're also now in a world where JobKeeper has been ripped away from childcare educators, and the current situation in Victoria has shone a light on why early educators still need support to stay connected to their employers. Without JobKeeper, there is no guarantee that early educators will continue to get paid if Victorian providers are forced to close due to a drop in demand or potential government directive. And if a provider shuts its doors, early educators could be pushed into Centrelink queues rather than receiving JobKeeper payments. The Morrison government has bungled early education and care throughout the pandemic, and it is parents, it is children, it is educators and it is providers who have paid the price every step of the way. Their free childcare policy left many providers struggling to stay afloat and families without access to care. And now their snapback and removal of JobKeeper will create further pain for families and for the sector. Australians need an early education and care system that ensures early learning is affordable and accessible for families. It needs to keep educators in jobs, and it needs to protect the viability of providers. And with my remaining time, I wanted to bring to Parliament, I faithfully promised someone who came to one of my mobile offices in McDowell with an idea to put to the government about how to help this sector. This person said to me, for a Prime Minister who is obsessed with high-vis, obsessed by construction, very keen to grab a shovel at every opportunity, why does he not use the recession and the policy responses that he has before him to build more childcare centres? It gives him jobs for construction workers. It gives him infrastructure being built. It gives him high-vis announcements, but it also gives more early educators jobs that they desperately need right now, and it gives more Australian families places in childcare centres, places that they need in order to participate in our workforce and work together to get our economy back out of recession. I thought it was a good idea, I thought it had merit, and I promised faithfully to bring it to Canberra and to put it to the government. I will conclude my remarks at this time because I did already have a good go at this before in June. Thank you very much.